Awake? A little bit? Just starting? Hopefully I'll wake you all up. All right. I'm so pleased to be here today at DevSecCon, which is, I think, really one of the coolest security conferences, developer conferences, DevSecOps, all of it together. Very special what we've built here, what they've built here over the last few years. And since it is birthday number 5, I have for you 5 new ideas. You are welcome to quote me. I've kind of volunteered. I'm here on stage. I've abdicated that privacy. And also, I don't want it, right? Like, please quote me. You're welcome to. My Twitter handle is Elissa Beth. You can find me on LinkedIn, Facebook, everywhere under my full name, Elissa Schevinsky. You're welcome to tag my company as well. But for the other attendees, if someone says something during this talk, just get their permission before you take a photo or quote them, just so people feel, so you'll feel comfortable to share a little bit to the extent that it gets interactive. So we're at a birthday party, like a grown-up adult nerd birthday party. And that's, I think, something special. And I took a look back into DevSecCon over the years. And you can see the growth, but a lot of things are still the same. We're still happy to be here hanging out. I think some of them were in warmer venues. I brought my coat. I almost thought I would wear it on stage. And there's a lot that's still the same in terms of messaging. DevSecCon was really like one of the first places and events talking about like continuous security and shifting left. The logo's still the same. I thought that's cool, although the T-shirts have changed. And of course, DevSecCon is about to do a lot. So it's really cool to be here, like at this moment where we're watching that happen. So a round of applause, right? Like for DevSecCon on the 5th birthday. I'm not going to sing, but I considered it. So maybe later we sing a happy birthday song for DevSecCon. But not me, you. You sing. If someone wants to volunteer to sing, if we have more time, I think maybe Francois would appreciate it. I did want to highlight, I've got this AMA at 11. You can ask me anything, anything. I don't have to answer, but you can ask anything. So as we go through the talk, think about what you might want to ask. And then just like a lot of other cool AMAs. So stick around. And in case you didn't get the URL, here's actually a moment. If you want to take out your phones right now, I will not be offended, and sign up for the community. And that way, we can all connect with each other over the next 2 days, and it seems pretty cool. So we have free Wi-Fi, no security. You can take your phone out and get signed up. All right, all of that administrative DevSecCon stuff done. I think the first thing I want to know when I come to an event like this is who else is here, right? Like, who are you? Especially because it's not like this is PythonCon or like PyCon, It's a mix of people. So if you identify as a security engineer, if that's you, raise your hand. That's not me. I should put my hand down. A little bit higher? I've got all these lights. Cool. And slightly different if you identify as hacker. So I love how bad these images are. I go looking for different images of different types of people or stereotypes, and then I find graphics that are so bad that I don't want to include them. I shouldn't share with you, but I can't help it. It's terrible. So yeah, not a lot of people identifying as hacker. The images for lady hacker, in contrast, are amazing. If you go do a search for lady hacker, it's great. And these are actual real hackers, not just people posing. So these are some less bad hacker graphics. If you identify as lady hacker, anyone here? I think maybe me a little bit. I'll raise my hand this much. If you're in DevOps, yeah, right? This is kind of a DevOps conference. Can I see that again? So if you're in DevOps and you're happy and you know it, can you raise your hand? According to this recent survey, DevOps people are the happiest people. They're really happy, really, really content, don't want to leave their jobs. So that's cool. Just thought it was worth sharing. Now, if you identify as a developer, who here identifies as a developer? This is my favorite image of a developer. And I found it when I was looking for junior developer images. But then I decided this is like senior developer. Because she's home, she's got a cat on her head. Like, that's great. That's, like, to me, the highest level of what I aspire to in terms of my lifestyle. All right, so now I have a sense of who's here. And we can get into some thoughts for 2020. To quote The Good Place, everyone here has seen The Good Place? Or you know of it? Raise your hand if you have. So The Good Place is a television show that actually dives pretty deep into philosophy. And one of the questions they posed are, what are our obligations to each other? Seems relevant to DevOps, right? Relevant to working together. But better yet, better than, is this better? Sound better now? Better yet, what are the obligations of individual developers when it comes to security? So I throw this question out at a lot of events, and I get very different responses based on the composition of the room. So if you believe that developers are responsible for security, raise your hand. Is that everyone here? Yeah, right? Like, a lot of the room feels that. That's part of what we're doing here. And how does this change when you're part of a team? Does anyone have a perspective on this? Can I get some volunteers? Anyone? What do you think? If you're part of a team, are you still responsible for security if you're a developer? Yeah. It's so noisy with the heaters. This may not work. It may have to be just me talking the whole time. OK. So when I've given this talk, the people who believe that maybe developers shouldn't be responsible for security, the reason would be because there are other people on the team who are assigned those tasks, or they're relying on QA, they're relying on, security members. I think that developers are responsible for security, but I can hear the other point of view. And you run into these questions and these challenges, right? Like, for those of you who followed Tanya's talk in Seattle, at DevSecCon in Seattle, her thesis was, security is everyone's job. And so if we agree security is everyone's job, what do we do next? What do we do? How do we actually solve that? How do we make these collaborations work? These are one of the hardest problems. Like, we can get to where we agree that it's important, but then what? It's kind of an unsolved problem. We're still figuring out what are the best practices. And so I went to Unsolved Problems. On Google, I found this Wikipedia page, cold cases, violent major crimes. You end up going down this whole rabbit hole. I had to pull myself back. Unfortunately, we have Tash Norris here, who's actually going to be helpful and provide, hopefully, some more solutions, asking not only are we turning our engineers blue, but in this talk, we're going to cover how we turn these engineers blue. And so I've come to this particular DevSecCon a little bit worried about how difficult it is for us to all work together. But I'm excited that maybe after some of the sessions, I'll come out with some more answers. So hopefully I'll see you there. And for number 3, if you're keeping track, this has been a really big issue. How do we make open source security scalable? There was a huge conference recently in San Francisco dealing with the relationship between corporations and open source. And a lot of that conversation is about how open source is cool now for companies. Like, okay, we understand that, but what are companies going to do for open source? Is this debate new to people? Anyone here who's learning this or getting into this for the first time? Anyone here who could summarize what this issue has been around supporting open source maintainers? No volunteers? All right, then I'll summarize. Basically, we want open source maintainers to be doing security, but they don't necessarily have the money or the resources. It's really hard. That's part of why SNCC is doing everything that they're doing. But if you get to the root cause, we'd really like to support for individual maintainers to do it themselves. And so my radical, or hopefully not so radical idea, is that corporations should be taking on this responsibility. And we're really not seeing it. That companies are using these open source tools, they're benefiting from these open source tools. Facebook, Google, Microsoft, they have, millions of dollars that could be allocated. And it hasn't happened yet. Why not? One reason is there hasn't been community or collective pressure. And so if those of you who are here think that this is important, if you care about open source security and you'd like to see companies doing more, then get in touch with me and we can figure out what are some interesting next steps. Before I move on, I think this is actually a really juicy topic. Does anyone have any anecdote, any story you'd want to share on this? All right. Is open source the new attack surface? What do people think? Is there something that's a bigger attack surface right now than open source? It's not new. That's a good point. It's not new, right? It's an old attack surface. According to some reports, it might be on the rise. Do you think that there's more attack surface there than there used to be? So old attack surface, but maybe problem is escalating. What do people think? I see some nods. Any suggestions? What can we do about it? You're like, not me. Anyone else? Part of my job here as a Keynote is to get us all excited for the 2 days we have ahead, which was one reason I liked this question. Are open source developers security's new front line? Today at 11:20 a.m. So you can go to my AMA, and then you can go and see this talk. Before I move on, any other? All right, this one I am going to insist on at least one volunteer. What are your most difficult challenges in DevSecOps? Mine is everyone working together. I think that is just unsolved. We've really figured out, made so many advances technically, and the human element just remains this frontier. Anyone else? Yes? Shout it. The resistance. Wow, it's so noisy. Say that one more time. What does that mean? have needed another microphone. I didn't catch that.
People don't get a grasp of what we're trying to do, and they fight it back because they don't comprehend it, or they are just very comfortable with what is being done at the moment.
Right. There's resistance because people are comfortable.
Yep.
And so how do we solve that? That's education, right?
Correct.
What do we do, though, if people don't want to be educated?
Oh, great question. Show them that things actually work by measurements, and show them how the things are going to change and make their life easier.
Right. Because if people already have an emotional feeling, you can bring them along with the emotions they have. But if not, you can use data. You can use data to show how it's relevant to them. Anyone else? What are your most difficult challenges in DevSecOps? Yes?
I have a management problem. I need to get management to care about security so that we can give, cheers. So we can give time to the developers to actually care about security, because most developers, including myself, put the hand up when we say who's a developer, that's me. They not taught it. It's just not taught. It's not taught at university, and historically, it's something that you have to pick up, and organizations expect you to just know, and the security people often sometimes forget what it's like when you don't know. So actually getting management to cut time out where people aren't doing features to actually learn about security to make the organization better from the ground up. That's my biggest problem at the moment.
Wow. Well, and developers need the time to do the testing and fix the issues too, right? So like even if you do know the security, if you're rushed, it's too hard to do it. So what are you going to do about it?
Well, it's ended up being my job, so I do security threat modeling with teams. So I've got 40 developer teams that I've got to do Strive threat modeling with. They're geographically dispersed, and at the moment I'm doing about, what are we doing, about 4, 6?
Yeah, about 4.
Yeah, about 4, 6. Nate's helping me. We're working together with the security, and we're trying to build that bridge between the developer community and the security people. And it's hard, because we're transitioning at the moment from one space, which is more of a sort of startup view, to a more sustainable organization. And we've got a big deluge of open source library issues that we're trying to fix, and we're trying to educate the developer community. And getting that reach into management to say you need to care about this if you're going to have a long-term sustainable platform is quite a challenge.
Wow. Well, find me later. I think that's really interesting.
Yeah, sure.
And I have management point of view, so maybe I can be helpful. And I guess I'm inspired by you trying to do this. That makes me happy. That's like a great start to the day. Hopefully maybe some of you will be inspired as well to try to do this inside your organizations. And thank you for sharing. Anyone else? One more story from this side of the room over there. I don't actually see anyone. I'm just like calling on the general part of the room, putting pressure. So very bright lights, forgive me.
Morning.
Yes.
I guess one of the most difficult challenges that I have right now is I see security validation being very waterfall. Why? Because when you talk about early validation, or in either functional or non-functional, with respect to security, we're really looking at open source scans or static code scanning, dynamics code scanning, et cetera, But if you're, say, for example, a SaaS company, and you're talking about the service going out in the market, that perimeter services, how your application interacts from a service point of view, that is all validated really at the end stages. When you start talking about, well, we're a company, we want to go from an on-prem to a SaaS organization. Let's build our service strategy now. Let's build the cloud architecture. The application somewhere fits, in the middle of the architecture. There's so many periphery services that it's talked to.
So it's a testing problem, is what you're having?
It's not I would say the whole security validation, right? I mean, initially at the code level, obviously the development teams are involved in things like early code scanning. But there is a separate security team, like a cloud security team, for example, who validates the overall security at the end stages of the service strategy, wherein you figure out, oh, you know what, there's a major problem. We got PII in the application log data. Yeah. So it kind of feels very waterfall, in order to come back to a product which has been built 20 years ago. and start talking about security refinements, from my perspective.
Interesting. Well, find me later. I'd be happy to dive into that a little bit more.
Sure.
It's certainly an interesting challenge. And good luck with that. It's not easy.
Yeah, it is. It is. It's a lot of work. It's just, things come, round the circle. You have to again start working on a re-architecture of your product, which has been in the market for 20 years. It's just, the time to market increases. Yeah. So
Right.
it's a whole lot of delay there.
It's very hard when you have older applications, legacy applications, older companies. I do a lot of work around that. And I think that's where DevSecOps gets really interesting, is you have these legacy companies, legacy tech, and we're trying to now do continuous integration, we're trying to do continuous security, we're trying to move and do new things. So I think DevSecOps is an important movement for that, but it's hard. It's hard when you have really old stuff. Anyone, one last story, and then I'll move on? I think that we got it. Okay.
Yeah, sorry.
Oh.
I was in the process of standing up, sorry.
Please.
So the biggest challenge I find in DevSecOps is a cultural issue. So I work for a security team, traditional banking InfoSec team, but I also act as a mediator with the DevOps community. I was brought in to do that mediation, and the security team are continually saying, we need to break down these silos and create a positive security culture, which is what I've gone out and done. And I've embedded myself in the DevOps team. I've lived and breathed the pain that they've gone through. But going back to the security team, it's still very, it's us and them. And this is what I have trouble with, is actually going back to security and saying, no, we can't do these things. If you want to implement these policies and these rules, at least give an alternative solution so that the developers don't get a backlog.
Right. So what do you think? How do you solve that?
I'll just carry on doing what I'm doing. I was hired, my senior manager said to me, don't go rogue. You can be my eyes and ears on the ground, just don't go rogue. And within 3 months, I'd already gone rogue in her eyes, because I'd started circumventing policies and circumventing rules that we had in place to get things through the pipeline. But not putting security at risk, obviously, because that's what I'm there to do. But I've driven a positive culture within the dev community, and they're actually coming back to me saying they're getting better return of investment by the policies that I've changed. So it's just about creating a more positive security awareness within the dev teams. Security themselves seem to think that developers are stupid, and they're people. They're not stupid. They're just not aware, as we've spoke already, of the security that needs to be embedded. And if we can get that embedded and into their mindsets, then we can actually create a more positive culture.
Right. Well, and people aren't stupid. They're good at what they do, and they're trained in what they do.
Exactly.
Which is what
security is not a return on investment. It's just something that has to be done, right? So security doesn't traditionally make money. Applications do. So.
Well, and developers have what they see as their jobs, and sometimes what management is asking them to do. So yeah, I think it's inspiring for me to hear people like you who are doing this. One reason why I'm a founder and not an employee is it's really hard for me to not go rogue, so I understand. Good
Thanks
luck
very much.
kind of threading that needle. And come find me later. I'd be interested in hearing that story in a little more detail. Does anyone have any thoughts on that? Well, the problem exactly that you have is trying to figure out how to make the positive culture, right? That's the thing you're trying to figure out, how to make the positive culture?
Yeah, pretty much. It's like I'm doing the best I can as a one-man band, but it's a case of I'm just treating everyone like humans and just creating that positive culture by saying, look, I need to achieve this goal. Let's work together and get it done. I'll take on a lot of the work myself, which could cause me to be a bottleneck, but the devs are actually seeing the work I'm doing, and they're actually reaching out to help. So it's just that positive community. That's what I find I've got the most traction from. Rather than going in and saying, hey, I've found a bunch of problems in your source code, I'm going to stop development. It's kind of like, well, let's carry on developing, let's audit it, and let's try and work on a way to make things better.
Yeah, pretty much niceness. Also niceness in security, right? I wish that wasn't such a radical concept. So for the last one, I have some in my back pocket, but does anyone want number 5 to come from you? You have a radical idea in DevSecOps for 2020? From the back? I'm trying to everyone wake up. Come on, everyone stand up. Everyone up. We're doing this. We're really doing this. You have to all be really awake for the other speakers. This is my job. Just small jump. One more time. Say, happy birthday, Francois. Happy birthday, DevSecCon. All right, you can all sit down now. Thank you. Thank you so much. This is my job. We have to all be awake. All be awake for these amazing speakers coming up. If no one here wants to take the stage and put in number 5, my number 5, and the reason why I like being here at DevSecCon so much, and why the DevSecOps community means so much to me, is just like niceness and information security. I have a good friend who posted on Twitter about the hacker conferences in Vegas that for new people, they should go and they should be part of it, and they should know that people are going to punk them and troll them and hack them and steal their stuff, and that's okay. Now you're part of the community. And I just think that that's like not what I want to be part of, and not where I want to be. And I wish it weren't a radical idea, but it is still kind of a radical idea. The concept that we should do niceness and professionalism, be nice and be professional in the security space. And I think DevSecOps is already really like on the front line of that. But following up on some of the stories that just came out, that's what I would want to leave you with, that I'm grateful to be part of a community that cares about that, and I think we should keep having that like really top of mind. It's going to be what's going to help bring developers along and like listen to us and trust us, and to not, people aren't educated on security, but it doesn't mean that they're stupid, and it doesn't mean that we should punk them. And I encourage you all to stay in touch. I think we have a few more minutes. We're a little behind schedule, so I'm going to try and keep us on schedule. Does anyone have any questions before I jump off the stage? You can save them for the AMA, but you can do it here as well. Does anyone want to sing a birthday song to DevSecCon?
I actually had a question.
Please.
What would you say is actually the hardest barrier to creating a culture shift within development teams of having a security focus? Because as the previous speaker was talking about, having the security team coming and pointing out essentially flaws within their system isn't exactly looked upon.
Right. Right, it's so hard. So I think there's 2 ways to do it. One is if you're building a team from scratch, you can hire people who are already kind of security people, and that makes it easy. When I was at Brave, everyone there was like a security and privacy person, so that's like a cheat, right, if you're starting from scratch. But if you already have a community, I think you have to figure out how to integrate it into like the KPIs, into things that developers are accountable for, and how to do the education in ways that are warm and friendly and are, for people to level up and not for them to feel bad. And that differs from organization to organization, right? So the way you do training at a startup is different from how you do training at an enterprise. And so it ends up being very personal to the culture. But ultimately, it does have to be about respecting where developers are coming from, respecting that they're in a rush to ship code. They may not care about security. You have to show them and walk them through what are the impacts to the organization and what are the reasons why they have a responsibility now that they never had before, right? Like, how does it feel when you suddenly have a whole set of new tasks? It feels like hard and kind of weird. And like, how come I didn't have to do this before? Does anyone have any suggestions, someone who's made this work in their organization? Basically, I think this is like the hardest problem. It's really hard to change culture. And so we see this in diversity and inclusion. We see this in every aspect of culture. That when you have culture, it's so hard to change it. And so it's the same thing, too, here in security. The easiest thing is to start from day one. And if you can't start from day one, people tend to follow management and tend to follow like the leaders, like the popular kids, the cool kids in an organization. And so you can leverage that to shift culture. Any other, I'm here, you can ask me anything. People have lots of things they want to ask me, but they're polite. Especially we're in London, we're very polite. Anyone else? All right, you'll save it for the 11 o'clock AMA. I'm so thrilled to be here and on this anniversary. Wish me once again, happy birthday, DevSecCon. Round of applause for DevSecCon. Happy birthday number 5. And you're welcome to follow up. If there's questions you didn't want to share here, you can send me on Twitter. My DMs are open for better or for worse. And thank you again for holding space.
Thank you very much.